The others look from him to me and back. I fumble for words as a cold gust of wind blows into the outpost. You're the replacement for Christian? I manage. And the other Adam raises an eyebrow. Christian? He replies. Christian? Repeats another voice. A grizzled man pokes his head inside from around the corner. It's Sokolov. Officer Sokolov, the same Russian officer that led me here. When exactly? A week ago, maybe? Feels like fucking months. Everyone inside salutes, myself included, and the man returns it, bidding us to ease with a grunt and a wave. Elena steps forward and asks something of the man in Russian. He replies and gestures from Adam to me. I hear him mention Christian's name, and Elena sadly shakes her head with her response. Sokolov sighs and looks to the ground. Shame, he says in English. I will miss that one. A big loss. Wait, sir. I cut in, stepping forwards down the corridor myself. You didn't know that Christian was dead? Then what's Adam doing here? Well, I'm here to replace you, man. Adam says. Turns out you were never supposed to be up here in the first place. I'm the one they wanted to send. Jesus, I reply, sucking some air in through my teeth. I knew nothing of Christian till now, Sokolov says. I do not deal with this. If replacement requested, then he will be here. I do not know where from. One of the others will be bringing them up when available. He points at me. You, Smith, duty over. Congratulations. Time to go. And he half turns, expecting me to follow. The others turn to look at me. Charlie, April, Yuri, and Elena, all watching. I consider it, I consider going with Sokolov. I mean, why shouldn't I? I've done my time. I did my duty. I answered the call when the call should never have gone to me in the first place. It was all a fuck-up. A classic logistical blunder. I mean, I had my suspicions. But I really thought that with something like this, the aboves would have been more careful. I guess I was wrong. But still, I can't just go. Not now. If I stay, sir, then we have the 6. The 6 required for the optimal running of the outpost. I turn to Elena. That's right, isn't it? Despite all this space, all these empty rooms, 6 is the magic number. That's what you said. 6 defenders. Elena opens her mouth, hesitates, then cautiously agrees. She turns to Sokolov. This is true, sir, she says, then goes to say some more in Russian. And Sokolov regards her, then me, and then he just shrugs. You want to stay? Stay. You were offered way home. Remember this. He takes a step back, his coat rustling in the wind. As I said, if you requested replacement for Christian, then they will be here within day, maybe 2, maybe 3. Weather depends. Goodbye. We stand to attention and salute, and he nods one back. Then away he goes, turning on his heels and clattering back through the bones, scarcely giving them a second glance. He does call back over his shoulder though, one more time before he disappears into the haze. Shame about tower. Will inform command. Hopefully fixed by end of this quarter. And that's that. I can just about make out his silhouette, clambering over the little wall that surrounds the outpost. And then he vanishes, leaving the 6 of us in the open gate of the outpost. Adam Smith looks between us, perhaps catching a glimpse of the exhaustion, the ever-flickering, quietly burning fear that now shimmers in all our eyes. He looks down again at the bones. He swallows, So, would anyone care to explain this situation to a newbie like myself? He asks, with a weak, dry laugh. No one laughs with him, and the man is led grimly through the outpost and into the hexagon. We sit in silence for a while as Adam eats from a can of Russian meat mush of some kind. His chewing and the occasional hiss of a pipe in the walls are the only sounds. Snow falls slowly and silently beyond the glass. Adam keeps opening his mouth as if to speak, then deciding against it, choosing instead to simply shovel in more meat mush, unsure if he actually wants any answers, or if he'd prefer to live a little longer in blissful ignorance. At last, he can stand it no longer, and he turns in his seat to face me. Adam, what's going on, man? What the hell happens here? Russians and Americans together? What's the deal with that? Russians and Americans together. Yes, that too was my first concern when I arrived here. I scarcely even consider this international anomaly at all now, compared to all the surreal nightmarish nonsense that is thrown at us here on the regular. The fact that we're working with the army of the Russian Federation barely even registers as a flicker in my thought processes. I'm gonna level with you, man, I tell him, breaking the unofficial seal my comrades and I have been keeping. This place is dangerous. We fight demons here. Adam laughs, and as before, no one joins him. I stare at him, blank-faced. You're kidding, right? He asks. Demons? Come on, man. Are you religious, Adam? I ask him. I don't think I've ever asked you before. Well, no, he says in response. No, not really. You will be. April, Charlie, and I all murmur in unison. Demons? Is this a joke? Adam stands up, angrily. Stop fucking around. Do you have any idea what I had to go through to get here? Our helicopter nearly crashed in a damn storm. Elena herself rises to her feet. The other Adam is a little taller than myself, but she stands higher than even he, and I can feel the second-hand frost of her Arctic glare pouring into this newcomer. American Yets, she mutters, glancing over to Yuri. Yuri, however, says nothing. To my great interest, he simply looks down to the floor. I catch a fleeting scowl on Elena's face. Maybe even a touch of concern, perhaps. But she lets it go. Adam takes a step back, awkwardly, and then strides over to me. He gets right up to my face, though I don't flinch. Adam, he says, desperately. Come on, what the hell is this? Demons? We're not fighting demons. That's a fucking joke. What are we doing here? I pause. You know what? Maybe you're right, Adam. Perhaps you should be addressing your questions to Elena here instead. I look over to her, my gaze heavy, and I know that she can feel its weight. The snow falls, and the tension in the room tightens somewhat. April stares at me. I can see her in the corner of my eye. Her lips remain sealed, but the meaning behind her paranoid expression is clear. Adam, it says, are you sure about this? If we confront her directly, there might be no going back. We don't know what she's capable of. The blood in my body begins to chill considerably as Elena's eyes pour back into mine. Her mouth twitches, and it pulls that scar grotesquely across her cheek. I stand up. Elena, it's time to share with us what you've been hiding. I simply don't know what we're fighting anymore. I'm realizing that I never really did. Please, just tell us the truth. What are we fighting? Why have you dedicated yourself so wholeheartedly to this outpost? Why 6? Why 6 people only? And who are you? April asks, in a quiet, almost imperceptible voice. "I do not know what you're talking about," Elena replies levelly, all eyes fixed on the woman as the wind blows with a sudden, renewed force beyond the walls. The snow is whipped into a frenzy. "We don't have long to go till nightfall now, chaps," Charlie mutters. He remains seated at the back of the room, but as with us all, his eyes are on Elena. "Elena, come on. You know something. It's obvious. Just share with the group, and we can all move on." "I don't have time for this," Elena mutters, and turns to take her leave. She finds herself blocked, however. Yuri, having risen from his seat, has stepped in her way, blocking her path from the room. "This is ridiculous," she says, then points at Yuri and barks something in Russian. Yuri shakes his head, his hands by his sides. Elena scoffs and tries to go for another exit, and this time she is blocked by Charlie, likewise rising up from his seat to stand in her way. "You people are crazy. We defend Outpost. That is our job." With a sudden and surprising sob of anguish, Elena reaches down to her belt. To her gun, perhaps. Maybe not. But every single person in the room catches the motion, and before Elena's hand reaches her waist, 4 weapons are drawn, cocked, and aimed directly at her. "Whoa, Jesus, what the?" Adam begins, but his surprise is lost beneath the shouting. Elena's face crackles with fury. It's an almost palpable electricity, a current running between the 6 of us. "Yuri!" she shouts into the man's face, her forehead thudding against the butt of her rifle. "Let me pass. How could you do this to your own comrade?" Her words blur into Russian, rife with expletives. Sweat buds on my forehead and leaks in little trickles down my neck. Elena swivels to face me, and the sweat freezes against my skin. "Elena, stand down," I mutter. "I'm sorry. I don't want to shoot you, obviously." Elena strides towards me, and I raise the gun higher, stumbling in retreat, shouting now. "Elena, stop! Stop now or I will shoot!" She hesitates and bares her teeth at me. "I do not know the answers. I know nothing. I guard Outpost, like you all." Yuri tuts and shakes his head. He grunts something in Russian under his breath. Elena responds to this with a sharp 180, pulling back her fist and smashing it into Yuri's nose. Blood splatters against the wall, and Yuri scrambles backwards, shaking his rifle in Elena's face and shouting at her in loud, very angry Russian. We're all shouting again now, but Elena pays it no mind. "You will not shoot me. All too soft. Need me to stay alive regardless. Kill me and I'll die." "Why?" I ask her, pleading in my voice. "Why, Elena? Why do we need you to stay alive? What are you to this place?" I lower my weapon with a sigh and slump back into my chair, running a hand through my hair, the tension trickling away. It's pointless. Elena's right. We're not going to shoot her, and we all know it. We're putting our lives on the line. We came close to a total loss last night. The demons almost got what they wanted. Perhaps some of them did. I turn to her. But we don't know what they want. How can we effectively defend when we don't know even the simple fact? It might be easier tonight with Adam here. But why? Why is 6 better than 5? Is it better than 7? Elena clenches her jaw and regards me. Come on, Elena. Пожалуйста. Please. The gears turn in Elena's head as she rubs the bruise forming across her knuckles. Then, she too simply slumps down in a chair with a sigh. One directly opposite me. Charlie and April cautiously lowered their weapons, though Yuri does not. Elena glances over to him and shouts. Yuri mutters something to himself and reluctantly does as she says, lowering his weapon. He keeps it in his hands, however, and chooses to take a seat at a far distance. There are 6 needed to guard the outpost. Elena begins wearily, her voice passionless. She sounds tired. So tired. No more than 6. Too many people here is like pouring blood into the sea. All those heartbeats, all those thoughts, feelings, fears. The enemy comes like sharks. They came like sharks last night, Charlie says from his position. And there were only 5 of us. So what happened? What changed? They got themselves a taste of what it is they're after. Driven to bloodlust, I guess. They share a consciousness. You all saw it previous night. The shadow in mountains. The giant. The spirit of the enemy. Elena wavers, then continues. We suffered so greatly last night because we were without Christian specifically. I don't understand, I murmur. Why Christian specifically? We'll be okay tonight, right? We have the 6. We have the new Adam. Adam Smith, Elena says, looking up at last to our newest member. How was your childhood? He regards her. I'm sorry? Your childhood. Good or bad? Simple question. Well, good, I guess. Pretty damn good. My parents were, yeah, she says with a dismissive wave. Didn't ask for your life story. She sighs. Tonight will be hard. Christian was good defender because he understood the truth of suffering. He and I were good friends. I like to hope. Something shimmers in Elena's eyes, and she wipes them with the back of her bruised hand, half turning away. My childhood was not good. It was bad. Very, very bad. I understand what it means to suffer when suffering was not deserved. More than most. Christian understood this too. We were shields against the enemy. The greater your understanding of suffering, the greater the strength of the outpost, the greater the resistance to the demons. She looks around the room. Yuri, I know childhood was not great, but was fine. And you, Westerners. She looks from Charlie to April, to Adam and to myself. You do not know suffering in its purest form. Your use here is limited. I try to process this. But I thought we had spiritual resistance or whatever. The ley lines. The ley lines are real. The supernatural resistance real. That is why you're here. But even despite this, your use is limited. So I don't command just send soldiers with shit childhoods then. April asks, why don't our governments just send people with awful upbringing? Because, Elena cuts in angrily. They do not know. No one knows, except I know. Christian knew, and now all of you know too. And you must keep it a secret. You must. If I believe you intend to share this secret with anyone, I will kill you. I am not joking. She looks between us, one by one. Why? I ask. Why is this secret so important to keep? To pizza. Elena sighs, shaking her head. Think about it. Governments want to defend Outpost. What do you think governments do if they know they can defend it more securely with soldiers who have suffered as children? I open my mouth, but say nothing. Elena continues. Government will create these soldiers. They already send soldiers from the ley lines. If they know, they will be better soldiers for having suffered. They will take them and they will make them suffer. And I will not allow this. Never, never ever. No one will suffer like I did. No one will go through what I had to go through. They wouldn't, April murmurs. No government would do such a thing. I mean, the Russians might, but the American government? No, they'd never do anything so cruel. Her words hang dead in the air. Wouldn't they? Elena mutters quietly. And darkly, we considered this. All right, I say slowly. So that I suppose I can understand. But the enemy, they're not demons, are they? They can't be. There's just no way the more I think about it. We're not battling the forces of hell here, are we? But they respond to the religious stuff, to Christianity. Why? Why is that? Drivlian. Yuri grunts, scratching the stubble across his chin. We fight Drivlian. The word on the wall of the cavern. That is what Yuri was researching in the archives. What's he talking about? It's an accusation. He waits for Elena to confirm his words. And at last she does. She turns to look out of the window and she nods. Yes, the Drivlian. That's what we are fighting. Not demons, but people. A race of people called the Drivlian. They were all destroyed 1,000 years ago. A name lost in time. They became slowly the Devils. The Devils. And then, simply, demons. The Drivlian, Charlie repeats. Never heard of them. And who the fuck might they be? And why do they want to access this building so bloody badly? Elena closes her eyes. She takes a slow, deep breath. And she tells us the story. She tells us the story of the Drivlian and of Olga of Kiev, the woman in the painting. The Drivlian were, so she says, an ancient race of people who lived in what is now Eastern Europe over 1,000 years ago. Vaguely Slavic in ethnicity, with their own customs, stories, aspirations and anthems. Elena believes the song we hear across the mountains at night to be the song of the Drivlian people. A man named Oleg of the Rus led the dominant nation in the region at the time, and the Drivlians, amongst the other tribes and peoples of Eastern Europe, were expected to pay tribute and swear him their loyalty, an oath of service in exchange of Oleg's defenses. Upon Oleg's death, however, the Drivlian lords changed their minds at a midnight council in the midst of a snowstorm. It was decided that they would abandon the other people and choose to immediately halt their tribute and all promise of fealty. Oleg's successor was a man named Igor of Kiev, a man who made many mistakes, a man misguided, but a good man all the same, a man who did his best by his people. Igor, unsure how to approach the Drivlians, initially sent an armed force to their capital to demand what he was owed, and was met with indignation and verbal hostility, and he returned with a meager tribute, far less than what was promised, than what was owed. Not wanting to escalate matters any further, Igor, for a second attempt, traveled to the wintry home of the Drivlians himself, to speak to their leaders personally, and to fix what he hoped was little more than a frayed thread of diplomacy. Elena pauses for a moment as she reaches this part. She swallows and rubs her throat. And she tells us that the Drivlians saw the situation a little differently. They murdered Igor of Kiev by tying his legs to birch trees, the trunks bent and trembling and held in place with ropes and nets. Once Igor had been secured, and the Drivlian lords had posted the breaking of their oath, the nets and the ropes were released. The trees in all their might and power sprang back to their original opposite positions, and Igor was promptly turned into. There are apparently accounts from those present that say they saw his bones burst right out from his body, though of course there is no way to verify now if such was true. Igor's death was felt across the region, but by no one greater than his loving wife, Olga of Kiev, Olga of the Rus, the woman depicted in the tower's painting. Whilst the Drivlians celebrated their freedom, Olga's soul was twisted and burnt into a driving force for vengeance, for revenge, for justice. The Trevlians, emboldened by their newly found freedom, gloated to Olga. And, as the first female ruler of the Rus, she was perceived as a little more than a pliable weakling. The Trevlians were wrong. They did not see the Arctic fire that burned behind her eyes. They did not see the frost that formed with her every waking breath. They did not see when the first train of their boastful ambassadors were buried alive, scrabbling and scratching and screaming in the perpetual darkness. They did not see when the second were tricked and trapped into a lock and burning building, reduced to a little more than charred and blackened bones. And they did not see when Olga, acting the meek and wicked woman, requested an overdue funeral for her husband Igor at the sight of his death. Her request was granted, and as she wept for what was lost in the Trevlian capital, the Trevlians drank. Drunkenly, they plotted their plans for the future. They wagered on who would be the one to marry Olga of Kiev. And as the night progressed, they were slaughtered in the thousands. Olga's Russes killed each and every noble, guard and soldier present, and the city was set ablaze. It was only then that the Trevlians began to see. Rus's reinforcements circled around and pushed their enemy easy, and one by one, the cities of Trevlian were razed. Every plea, every desperate request for peace and for surrender were met with little more than wind. Olga never ceased. She never stopped. Onwards, she marched with her soldiers, driving the Trevlian ever back. On one late day of the slaughter, Olga halted and commanded her forces to wait. A message was sent out. The hearts of the embattled people leapt when at last, at long last, it seemed that Olga of Kiev would finally show them mercy. After all, their lords and nobles were all now dead, buried or burnt or slashed to pieces, and the last of the Trevlian people were besieged in the final city still standing, their lone bastion. Olga, promising peace, demanded only one final tribute. 6 birds. Just 6. 6 birds from each household, as a promise of freedom and the war's end. The Trevlians were relieved, and they gladly accepted, and the tribute of the great flock was swiftly made and delivered to Olga herself. Olga had no intention of forgiving the Trevlian, however. As she stood amongst this host of birds, she commanded her soldiers to attach to each and every one a string of sulfur and rags of cloth. Then, when the sun set that day, the sulfur was set alight, and the birds were released. The orange of the glow was set to shine in Olga's eyes as the sky began to sparkle with 100,000 embers. The birds did as Olga knew they would. They returned to their homes, to their nests, in the rafters and roofs of the houses and buildings of the Trevlians, and all at once, the wood began to burst into flame. The city was a burning wreck within the hour, and there was nothing its inhabitants could do but run, to flee yet further still. They were chased by Olga's soldiers for hundreds and hundreds of miles east, away across the wastes. And there, at the base of the Ural mountains, when they could go no further, they banded together, the Trevlians, for one desperate final stand. They were the men still standing, they were the women, they were children, they were elderly. They were not warriors nor fighters, but they still numbered over 100,000. And in those final hours, they all felt the end, and they all prepared to fight, as only one backed into a corner truly can. They still had their hope. Olga, however, did not plan to fight. She would not accept a single further drop of Rus blood being spilled for these demons. And so as the Drevlians were steadily encircled, it came to pass that she burst from the shadows behind them atop a rocky hill, her cross in hand and shining in the reflection of the fire her soldiers placed in the darkness. Her robes whipped about her body in the growing windstorm, and she stood defiant as she began to chant, as she raised that cross up high. And, in the name of her god, she swore to tear the Drevlian souls right out from their bodies, to tear them to pieces, as they had torn apart her beloved. She roared with a power the Drevlians had not yet seen. Christianity was unknown to these people. They did not know the cross. They were afraid of the strength of her conviction in this foreign Abrahamic mysticism, and that in turn gave it a power unique to that moment of madness. Whether God himself was involved is not certain, nor is the certainty of his existence. But on the Drevlian's final day, it was Olga's power, channeled through her cross, that led to the end of their story once and for all. Their souls were ripped from their bodies and cast out into the waste as shadows. There would be no peace for the Drevlians, no eternal rest or slumber, only suffering, endless, maddening suffering. The only material substance that was left of the Drevlian people were soulless bodies of a rock-like, chalky crust. And these husks were carried one by one up through the cracks of the mountains, where they would be sealed away in a dark, deep, near unreachable cavern. Olga made sure to carve into the cavern's walls the nature of their crimes, with the warning that they would remain here for eternity, with no rest and no respite. And there, the story ends. The scattered, twisted souls of the Drevlian eventually found their cavern. But the descendants of the Rus meant an eternal guard. The reason as to why gradually lost through the centuries. An eternal guard that had largely held off the attacks on the Outpost. Until now, that is. Until me, with a mistake as idiotic as a mix-up with names. Elena trails off, and we all stare off into space, taking in the gravity of this outrageous knowledge. But what about the other outposts? I murmur. Christian said there was one in Australia. India, he said. I know what he said. Elena interrupts. He said those things because that's what I told him. I lied. There are no other outposts. There is this and only this. There are no other outposts. So, it's just this one then. Just us six. Alone in the mountains. Adam and I were born in the same place. I say out loud, giving voice to another thought that's been nagging at me. We were both born on the same ley line. Our supernatural resistance should be the same, no? So why has shit hit the fan only recently? Elena snorts. I told you this at the beginning. You are not like the others. You are childish and immature. You simply have a dangerous personality. You are type to bring chaos and calamity wherever you go. You have not suffered, Adam, and you are still to suffer this outpost. Yuri says something in Russian under his breath. Elena shoots him a look. I think in that moment about my brother, about his death 10 years ago. I push aside the false voice that the demon, the Drevlian, eased into my head. And I remember my brother's true voice. His presence. His warmth. I've done my share of suffering, Elena. I say quietly. But thanks. Still, maybe things would have been different if the correct Adam had been sent in my place. Maybe Christian would still be alive. Maybe the tower would be undamaged. Maybe the cavern beneath us would still be sealed away. I guess we'll never know now. So why the hell are we doing this? April asks, pressing her palms against her eyes for a moment. We're stopping the Drevlian souls from reaching their bodies. I get that. But I still don't understand why. Why don't we just let them return? Let this whole thing end. Be done with it once and for all. Then no one will need to stay in the outpost. It can be decommissioned. For one simple reason. Elena replies. If a Drevlian soul returns to body from which they were separated, they are flooded in an instant with 1,000 years of hatred, of bitter rage, anguish. A being is not meant to exist for so long. Return to material world, they find themselves displaced, out of sync. They are dangerous and violent, and brimming with latent spiritual power. If Drevlians successfully enter the outpost, breach cavern and find bodies, that is over 100,000 mind-broken monsters released into world. Bloodshed will return, cycle of hatred will continue. She rises to a stand, and I get the sense her speech is drawing to a close. It's getting darker anyway. Not much time left now. Night will be falling soon, and the new Adam still doesn't really have a clue what's going to happen. I stay here in this outpost, because my presence here is greatest shield Outpost could ever ask for. And second, to right the sins of the past. Olga's fury back then caused terrible pain and trauma to this part of the world. The story of the Drevlians is brutal, sad, complex, but if those souls return to the bodies, the terror unleashed on further innocents will be Zelizo, iron in its brutality. But that's not right, April replies, standing up herself. These people, the Drevlians, these are innocents they were torn from their bodies. That's what you said. Souls left suffering for 1,000 years. It's not right. Who are we to stand in the way of allowing them to return to their bodies for a final chance of peace? And there, Elena says, raising her hand in a half point, is why I keep secret. Easier to battle demon than Drevlian. Less moral compass dilemma. Fucking hell, Charlie says with a sigh. This is some heavy shit. Jesus. Something inside April snaps. She strides forwards and shouts directly into Elena's face. Are you her, Elena? She says. Are you Olga of Kiev? My first instinct is to snort with surprise. The question is ridiculous. But as the question settles into my mind, I take another look at Elena. I conjure up an image of the painting, and I try to place them side by side. No, surely not. Surely not. You know everything about her, April says, and I notice that she is trembling. You look like the woman in the painting, though she doesn't have that scar. And you've been here for a long time, haven't you, Elena? A long time. Decades at the least. You're Olga, and you're trapped here now. Trapped in this outpost in a web of your own making. Elena stares at April. And then she laughs. The sound is bright and clear, and we watch in shock and cautious amusement as she laughs and laughs and laughs, doubling over a little as she does so. You are kidding, she says, her face displaying a grin I've never even seen her wear before. Joke. You think I am a woman who died 1,000 years ago? April falters and takes a step back. She flushes. But, well, I thought. Americans are so funny. This is crazy. Elena snorts and wipes the corner of her eye. I am not Olga, April. April clenches her fists. She strides from the hexagon and into the little side room she showed me several days ago. I hear her rummaging and the clatter of something being knocked from the wall, and she returns a moment later with a framed photograph in her hand. I recognize it as the one with SGH 1987 written on the back. I'd almost forgotten about it. She flips it, undoes the clips, and slides the picture out from the frame. She holds it up to Elena's face. Explain this then. You see what's been written on the back of this picture? SGH 1987. Who is SGH? And how is there a picture of you at this outpost from 1987? You scarcely look any different at all. How is that possible? Elena's grin fades from her face, and she shakes her head with a sigh, her eyebrows furrowed. This is sad, April. You are smarter than this. She takes the photograph and points to the letters and numbers written there. What does this say, April? SGH. April replies, 1987. Elena shakes her head. No, wrong. It says SGH I-987. This photo is not from decades ago. It was taken in 2015. April's confidence trickles away. What? But... You know Samsung Galaxy, April? Samsung Galaxy tablets? Yeah, I guess. Elena thrusts the photo back into April's hands. This photo was taken with Samsung Galaxy. Samsung Galaxy SGH I-987. This is brand of device, not date or initials. I too consider this development. The brand of the phone that took the picture? Is that all it was? It seems almost too stupid to be true. But then again, what the hell do I know? Nothing apparently. Not a damn thing. And regardless, thinking time is up, it would seem. The shadows deepen, and before long, the sun will set. It's time to get to our stations. What are we going to do about the tower? I ask. It's weaponless, and we've broken the rule. No one's been in the thing for hours. We have no choice but to abandon it. Elena replies. We will have to survive the night without it. Everyone to your stations. Adam Smith, you go with old Adam Smith. Defend the outpost. Rule number 1. Do not allow enemy into outpost. Do not allow the enemy into the outpost. And away she goes. No one tries to block her this time. Still reeling from the info drops, heavy with the weight of her newfound knowledge. One by one, we depart for our stations. April drops a small shining silver cross into Adam's hand before she goes. Charlie gives the man a nod and wishes him well. Yuri says nothing to anyone, vanishing silently down a corridor, bringing a cigarette up to his mouth before he disappears completely around the corner. Come on, man, I say to Adam. I guess you're with me tonight. And so, away we go. Up and into the snow. To our station. Doing our duty. Manning the amalgamated weapons to keep away the intruders. The fire in the darkness, keeping the Drevlians trapped in their eternal cycle of darkness, despair and destruction. Armed with Bibles, using these holy books as weapons, as Olga of Kiev did herself 1,000 years ago. Defending the outpost, as we are all tasked with doing, as Americans, as Russians, as soldiers. The sun sets. The anthem of the Drevlians begins to play. Quietly at first, floating note by note across the mountains, as thoughts within thoughts swirl as a maelstrom across the turmoil of my mind. Time passes. The song rises. This anthem of the long-forgotten people plays. And the demons, no, the Drevlians, begin clambering up and out from the darkness. Adam Smith watches in abject horror as the hordes are sent crawling up the mountainside and towards the outpost. I call out the arrival of the enemy to my comrades, and the first beam is fired. As with every night previous, the battles begin to rage. Bones are sent bursting with clouds of smoke and fire, as the beams are cast in all directions, tearing through the shadows like blades through skin. Snow falls. The mists gather. My muscles ripple and burn with the strain as electricity crackles with the frost in the icy air. I task Adam Smith with reading aloud from the Bible. As with myself, he falters initially, but he gets the hang of it pretty damn quick. He bellows like a preacher out and into the wind, and his voice is carried out into the night. To the Trevlians, his words must come as a painful, torturous echo of the night they were lost. My heart goes out to them. It really does. But if Elena tells the truth, if these people become monsters the minute they return to their bodies, then is what I'm doing right now the greater good? Or am I just trying to justify this madness to myself? I am no longer certain that what I'm doing is right. I hammer the weapon down with a mechanical thud, and I send a screaming beam down directly below, tearing through a Trevlian with his hand outstretched towards me. Its charred and blackened bones are sent flying in all directions. Movement in the night to my left bids me to turn my head. In amidst the mist and fog of the night, I see him again. That enormous man made of shadow between the peaks. The spirit of the Trevlian personified. And with his arrival, the hordes of the enemy are renewed. Thick and fast they approach, hungry for their prize down in the cavern beneath the outpost. I stare at the great shadowy spirit, willing him to turn and face me, and with a slow measured turn of his head, he does so. His eyes of silver lock with mine, and I hear his voice in my head. You know, don't you, Adam? I see it in your head. You have learned the truth. You know my story. And still you fight. Why? Do you think I don't feel pain when you burn my people to ash upon the mountainside? Rule 2. I remember. Do not engage verbally with the enemy. And as planned, I ignore this rule. I respond, and I ask my question. It's true, isn't it? I whisper. And at once, a great surge of demons adjust their course and clamber directly towards me. It makes no matter. I drop a device that Yuri constructed for me. A bomb of sorts that sends sparks of light spiraling in all directions as it disappears down into the darkness below. You are what's left of the Trevlian, and if you reach what you're so desperate for, you'll only bring havoc and chaos and further pain into the world. I grit my teeth and bring the beam around in an arc. Adam Smith is forced to shield his eyes as the rock below is burnt temporarily white with the glare. I'm sorry. I really am. But I've had no time to think. I don't know what the best course of action is in the long term. But for now, I can't stand back and allow you entry into this outpost. I cannot allow you to return. Please forgive me. The guilt comes in ebbs and flows. It is cold, but not as cold as the bitterness of the night. I clench my jaw and resume my battle, shouting out a verse of my own as the weaponized light intensifies. These are the people that used my brother's voice against me. The voice of my long-dead brother. These are the people that possessed Christian and brought about his death. You are just like her, whispers the spirit. I thought you were different. Perhaps I was wrong. I want an end to this. Just let us be free. Your bodies remain below the outpost. I mutter back. They must be there for a reason. There must be a reason that they haven't been destroyed. Maybe that knowledge has been lost. Or maybe it's just something else that Elena refuses to tell us. But there is nothing I can do now but my duty. I am a soldier, and these are my orders. I am sorry, Trevlian. I will not forgive you for this, Adam. And we will not forget. If all you want is peace, I asked, then why hide the truth from me, from all of us? Why possess Christian and make him a threat? I cannot reveal the truth until someone asks for it, replies the voice. Christian asked. I do not know why, but in reply, I showed him the vision of Olga of Kiev. Unlike you, he saw her face. He saw the hatred there, the hatred for my people. And Christian's heart was filled with nothing but sorrow and compassion. In this moment he was weak, and we possessed him. We took no pleasure in this. But I did what I had to, for my people. Why? I shout out into the night. Adam Smith turns to me in shock, but he keeps reading aloud from his book. He cannot hear the voice. Why would you do that? I turn from the Drevlian horde below and look again at the great shadow with its silvery eyes. It slowly looks down at one of its hands, with a sound like the distant rumbling of thunder. Because his hands dig faster than ours, comes the reply. And I see in my mind's eye the hole that the Drevlians dug with their shadowy fingers in the meeting room floor. You cannot be the spirit of your people, I muttered through clenched teeth. I refuse to believe that the spirit of an entire race could be so callously cruel, to trick a man into empathy, then using him and disposing him like a tool. I do not know what you are, but I will not grant you access to this outpost. Not tonight. I lift my head and shout out loud into the night, my voice carrying above the storm. Now, Elena! Now! Fire the weapon! The so-called spirit of the Drevlian, with its attention fixed wholeheartedly on myself, rumbles with the ethereal thunder and shifts its gaze over the roof of the outpost, its silvery eyes shining in the darkness. Its movement, however, as all its movements are, is sluggish, slow, far, far too slow. And from the darkness, Elena, wrapped in robes of black to conceal her position, pulls back hard on two simultaneous handles attached to the colossal gun on the outpost roof. An enormous mechanical crunch echoes out from the gears, and my teeth are set on edge with a sudden ringing. For a second or two, it seems as if the very wind itself is sent out in the opposite direction, and the scrambling of each and every Drevlian is halted as the monstrous weapon finally fires. A blast of heat is sent out in an intense circle of energy. I feel it against my skin, and my hair is whipped back from my head as a ring of light appears at the weapon's barrel, and a beam unlike anything I've ever seen so far explode out like lightning, crackling and tearing through the night towards the mountains and the mist, and directly through the heart of the great shadow. A twisted, crackling nervous system is briefly illuminated in white across the shadow's form, and it starts to leak out into the air as ink leaks out into water. A terrible scream is sent roaring through the mountains, and the entire horde of demons below bursts at once into clouds of shadow and bones as the enormous spirit collapses down and into itself, wounded and destabilized. Dust and steam is sent blasting out in all directions. Snow is disturbed and sent tumbling down the peaks. But we do not leave our stations. The Drevlian horde is displaced, and the giant spirit stays hidden away. But after a few hours of interlude, the attackers do return. They do not come as a tide though. They do not flow like water. They come alone or in small groups. Their fight and their power has been taken away, for this night at the least. And they are easy to deal with, far, far easier. And we continue our battle until the rising of the sun. The outpost successfully defended and kept from even a single breach. I turn to Adam as the sun rises. He is white with shock, eyes wide, his hands shaking. I clap him on the shoulder. The veins in my forearms all popped from the exertion. Good work tonight, man. Good work. Now come on, let's go. It's time to get some sleep. And away we go. My story is drawing to a close now. Just a little more to wrap up. I remained at the outpost for another couple of days. I did my duty, and I defended the place as best as I could. The Trevelyan's did not return in any kind of number to equal the night that the tower fell. And I would wager that could be thanks to our successful surprise attack on the spirit itself. If indeed a spirit he actually is. He will be more cautious in the future. I remained at the outpost until Christian's replacement arrived. A woman from Missouri. And since my departure synced up with April's, as scheduled, the two of us hit it out together after saying our goodbyes. A hug from Charlie, a handshake from Adam Smith, a muttering nod from Yuri, and even a flicker of what might have been a half smile from Elena. A sad smile, but a smile nonetheless. I still struggle with the morality of my role in the outpost, of what I did between those mountains, whether I was in the right by fighting back against the Trevelyan souls, or whether I should have just stood down and allowed them to return to what they crave so desperately. I still think about them, of those cursed, forgotten people, trapped in their endless cycle of desperation. And the outpost guardians, likewise trapped in their own cycle of grim and gruesome defense. Constant, ceaseless stress, night after night, battle after battle on the mountainside. I wonder how far the spirit of the Trevelyan would go to achieve his goal. I wonder how far Elena would go to maintain hers. Hell, do the horde of the Trevelyan souls even know what they're fighting for anymore? Do tonight's roster of the outpost soldiers for that matter? It's been months since April and I departed together. Charlie would have left by now. Yuri too, most likely. Not Elena though. Not Elena. I suppose she's still there, doing her duty. I looked back one final time as we departed the outpost, April and I, clambering over the waist-high wall of the edge of the courtyard. And to my surprise, the first thing I noticed was the flags. Upon my arrival, only the Russian flag flew proudly. The others, the American, the British, the Norwegian, and the NATO, they were old and worn, ragged and weather damaged. But I realized then, at the moment of my exit, that someone had replaced them. I don't know who. I don't know how exactly. I don't know exactly when. But one of my comrades must have taken the time to replace them, or even fix them up perhaps. The flags waved proudly in the breeze. Bright shades of red, of white, and of blue, side by side, together. I mentioned this to April on the helicopter ride back to the Ural's base, and she nodded. Yeah, I noticed that too, she said, but there was still something on her mind. I could tell, and I asked her to share with me. Olga of Kiev, she said, thoughtfully after a moment. I never got around to sharing this with you, but I read something interesting about her in that file. The one Yuri showed us. Do you remember? The nights we confronted Elena? I found something very interesting indeed. Oh yeah? I replied. What was that then? She changed her name, Olga, I mean, as she grew older. So the records say. Is that so? I asked her cautiously. And what did she change it to? April looked up at me as the helicopter passed over the peaks, To Elena. I considered this in silence. Silence, but for the monotonous buzz of the blades, whirring round and around as the chopper carried us away through the sky. It's a common enough Russian name, I replied uneasily. Yeah, April sat back, shifting in her seat. A common name. Still, I murmured. Still, she repeated, and we said nothing further for the rest of the flight. I saw her that night in my dreams. Elena. She stood atop the outpost, commanding its enormous rooftop weapon and pulling back on the handles. That powerful circle of the light had the barrel and giving way to the dazzling blast of the beam. To right the sins of the past, came her voice as a whisper on the wind, and her ropes were blown about her as the snow whipped up into a torrent. She looked at me, her eyes alive with glittering eyes. And in that moment, they were the same. Olga of Kiev and Elena of the Outpost.